Hi everyone. Today I want to share a story that happened to me about a year ago. I've always been a skeptic, never believed in the supernatural, but this incident made me reconsider my views. I'm not asking you to take my word for it, but if you've ever experienced something similar, you'll understand. It was autumn, when the days become shorter and the nights longer and colder. I lived alone in a small country house that I had recently bought. It was a cozy place surrounded by forest. I enjoyed the peace and quiet I found here, especially after living in a noisy city. One evening I returned home after a long day at work. It was already dark and a cold wind was howling outside. I lit the fireplace to warm up and settled on the couch with a book. Everything was as usual until I heard a strange knock. At first I thought it was the wind blowing branches against the walls. But the knock repeated, and this time it was more distinct. I got up and went to the window, where I thought the sound was coming from. Nothing suspicious was visible. The forest around the house seemed calm, only the shadows of the trees moving in the wind. I decided it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, and went back to my book. A few hours passed, and I was about to go to bed. I locked the doors and windows, made sure the fireplace was out, and went upstairs to the bedroom. Lying in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The feeling was so strong that I got up and went to the window to check the street. Again, nothing was visible. The next day, everything was normal. I went to work, came home, and spent the evening in front of the TV. But when night came, the strange feeling returned. This time I decided to check the whole house. I walked through all the rooms, looked into the basement and the attic, but found nothing suspicious. I was already about to return to the bedroom when I heard the same knock again, this time louder and closer. I froze. The sound was coming from the window in the living room. Approaching it, I cautiously looked outside. For a moment it seemed to me that I saw the silhouette of a person standing in the shadows of the trees, but as soon as I focused my gaze, the shadow disappeared. This scared me greatly, and I decided to call the police. The police arrived fairly quickly. They searched the entire house and the surrounding area, but found nothing. The officer told me it was probably just a stray animal or someone's prank. I nodded, but deep inside I felt that this was not the case. The next few days passed without incident. I started to think that it really could have been my imagination. But on Friday evening, everything changed. I worked late and got home around midnight. Entering the house, I noticed a strange smell, like someone had been smoking cigarettes. This was strange because I don't smoke and I hadn't had any guests. I walked through the house, trying to find the source of the smell, and suddenly heard a faint creak. It was coming from the attic. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed up. The attic was cold and dark. Dusty boxes and old things lying everywhere. Shining the light into every corner, I found nothing suspicious. As I was about to go back down, the flashlight revealed something strange on the wall. It was an inscription scratched into the wood, "I am always here." I was filled with horror. I ran downstairs and locked the attic door, trying to understand what was happening. Someone had been in my house, and that someone clearly wanted me to know. I called the police again, but this time they found no signs of a break-in or anyone being there. The officers began to think I was losing my mind, but I knew for sure I hadn't imagined it. I decided to install surveillance cameras around the house and outside. The first night with the cameras, I hardly slept, constantly checking the monitor. But nothing suspicious happened. The second night was quiet until about 3 in the morning when I saw movement on one of the cameras. A shadow slipped past the living room window. I froze, staring at the screen, when suddenly the camera started glitching, the image flickering, and I saw him. A man in black stood right in front of the camera, his face hidden by a mask. He was looking directly into the lens, as if he knew I was watching. Then he slowly raised his hand and knocked on the glass. I jumped out of bed and rushed to the window. But when I got there, he was already gone. My head was spinning from fear and adrenaline. I called the police again and showed them the camera recordings. This time they believed me. They increased patrols in the area, but it didn't help. The next night I couldn't sleep at all. Every sound and shadow made me nervous. Suddenly I heard heavy footsteps on the porch. I ran to the door and looked through the peephole. The man in the mask stood there, the same one from the recording. I grabbed a baseball bat and opened the door, ready to defend myself. But the porch was empty. I turned around and saw that all the windows in the house were open. I was trapped. Suddenly, the lights in the house went out. I stood in complete darkness, trying to hear anything. And then I felt someone standing behind me. A cold wind touched my neck, and I heard a quiet whisper, "I am always here." I turned around, but no one was there. I ran out of the house and drove to the police station. They searched the entire house again, but found nothing. I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. No one believed me, but I knew that man was real. That night, I decided not to return home. I rented a room in a hotel and stayed there. When I woke up in the morning, there were several missed calls from the police on my phone. I called them back, and they told me my house had burned down. The fire destroyed everything. I moved to another city and started a new life, but the fear never left me. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and feel someone watching me. I'm no longer sure it was just my imagination. Sometimes I look out the window and see a shadow standing in the distance. And then I remember those words, "I am always here." Take care of yourselves and don't ignore strange feelings. Sometimes they can save your life. This happened last summer. I was a college student and needed to find a place to live for the upcoming school year. My university was in a small town where finding affordable housing wasn't easy. After several weeks of searching, I managed to find a small house on the outskirts of town available at a very attractive price. The owner of the house was an elderly woman named Mrs. Bloom. She seemed very friendly and told me that the house had been vacant for several years but was in good condition. The house was quite old but cozy. It stood on the edge of a forest with only one neighbor, a farmer who lived in the house across the road. This place seemed perfect for studying quiet and secluded. I signed the rental agreement and moved in. The first week went well. I settled in and enjoyed the peace and fresh air. But one night, everything changed. I woke up to a strange noise. It was a quiet, almost inaudible tapping coming from the window in my bedroom. Opening my eyes, I saw that the room was dark and thought it was just my imagination. I tried to go back to sleep, but the tapping repeated, louder this time. Getting out of bed, I went to the window and cautiously looked out. In the darkness, I didn't see anything suspicious. It's probably just the wind, I thought, and went back to bed. But as soon as I closed my eyes, the tapping sounded again, this time from another window. Feeling chills run down my spine, I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. Carefully approaching the other window, I shone the light on it but saw nothing. My heart was pounding faster, and I felt something was wrong. But deciding it was just my imagination, I tried to calm down and went back to bed. The next day, I tried not to think about the night incident, but when evening came, I started to get nervous. That night, I heard the tapping again. This time it was louder, and it seemed like someone was deliberately trying to get my attention. The tapping came from the living room window. Taking a flashlight and a knife for self-defense, I slowly approached the window. This time I saw a shadow. Someone was standing outside, looking into the window. The flashlight illuminated the figure of a person in a black jacket with a hood. The face was hidden, and I couldn't make out any details, but I could clearly see it was a man. Terrified, I shouted, "Who are you? What do you want?" But instead of answering, the figure quickly disappeared into the darkness. I locked all the doors and windows, turned on all possible lights, and called the police. A patrol came, and the officers inspected the area but found no one. They said it was probably just a local teenager playing a prank. But that didn't reassure me. The next few nights passed quietly. I began to think it was indeed just a prank. But one night I woke up feeling someone watching me. Opening my eyes, I saw a silhouette at the door of my bedroom. In the darkness, I could barely make out the shape, but it was clear it was the same man in the black jacket. He stood motionless, watching me. I froze in fear, unable to move. The room was so quiet that I could hear my own breathing. The man stood there, as if knowing I could see him, but did nothing. I don't know how much time passed, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, I mustered all my courage and shouted, "Leave." The figure didn't move. I shouted again, but this time, except for an echo, there was silence. In desperation, I grabbed my phone and called the police, not taking my eyes off the stranger. But when I was distracted for a second to explain the situation to the operator, the figure vanished. The police came again, searched the house, but found no one. The officers stayed for a while to make sure I was safe, but then left, advising me to install an alarm system and cameras. I followed their advice. I installed cameras around the house and connected an alarm system. I thought it would help me feel safe. But night after night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Reviewing the camera footage, I sometimes noticed strange shadows, but nothing concrete. One night, about a month after the first incident, I woke up again to a strange sound. It wasn't tapping this time, but rather a creaking noise. Opening my eyes, I saw the bedroom door slowly opening. Light from the hallway illuminated the silhouette of a man. It was him. This time I was ready. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and rushed towards him. But the figure retreated into the darkness before I could get close. I turned on the light and searched the entire house, but found no one. The cameras didn't capture anything either. I began to doubt my sanity. Maybe I was just going crazy? But one day I found proof that it wasn't just a figment of my imagination. One of the cameras outside captured something strange. In the footage was a man standing by the back entrance. He was looking directly into the camera as if he knew he was being recorded. Then he raised his hand and slowly drew his finger across his throat, indicating that he wanted to kill me. After that, he disappeared into the forest. I showed the footage to the police, and they finally started taking me seriously. They increased patrols in the area and gave me some safety tips. But the fear didn't go away. Every night I was afraid he would come back. One night, when I had almost gotten used to the constant fear, something terrible happened. I woke up to the sound of the alarm. It had gone off in the living room. I grabbed the baseball bat and cautiously went downstairs. When I entered the living room, I saw a broken window and an open door. Inside, there was a mess, as if someone was looking for something. Suddenly, I felt a heavy blow to my head. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was the face of the stranger. He stood over me, his eyes filled with rage. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. The doctors said that neighbors found me after hearing the alarm and called the police. The stranger had escaped, and they still haven't found him. Several months have passed since then. I no longer live in that house and try not to think about what happened, but the fear remains. Every night, as I fall asleep, I'm afraid he'll come back. I'm afraid that one day I'll wake up and see him standing by my bed, ready to finish what he started.